What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hey, welcome to the Lead Counsel Podcast. It's your host, Tom Tona, here with Juliet. What's up, Jules?
Hey guys, welcome back.
You excited today, Jules?
I'm very excited for our guest. She seems like a very interesting woman, so I'm excited to speak with her.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's been a while. I've been trying to get Molly on the show. Today's guest is Molly Hough, who's an attorney who's dedicated her career to empowering other women in the business world. And specifically, her niche is associate marketing and business development. Molly's expertise is focused on teaching tangible skills to build a book of business, which I think is really needed in today's marketplace. Too many young attorneys don't realize that if you don't build a book of business, your value is going to be capped. Her vision extends beyond mere training. She's built and is building a community of like-minded women who are poised to revolutionize the legal profession. She's also a recognized top business development voice on LinkedIn. So this is kind of her sweet spot. And I'm excited to talk to her about it because I love marketing and business development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she's really going to bring a lot of value.
I think so too. That's why I wanted her on. So Molly, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you both.
Yeah, I am too. I've been following Molly, Jules, for a while on LinkedIn, on her website, on all different social media platforms. She's literally everywhere. And whoever's doing your social media for you, unless it's you, is doing a fantastic job. And even if it is you, you're doing a fantastic job. So right out of the gate, do you handle your own social? Or you have somebody kind of managing it for you? What are you doing?
For the first year, I was doing social media all on my own because, it's very expensive to hire someone. And it also, you need to learn your own voice, right? Like it takes time to understand how you want to speak to others online. And to me, that can't really be done other than through just doing it and figuring it out, right? So, my posts even a year ago are much different than my posts today because I've learned, every day how to write better, how to activate my audience better, and how to speak to them in a way that they feel, seen, heard, and remembered. And so now I have a social media manager that I hired last fall that has been doing an incredible job and has saved me, I don't know, probably 10, 15 hours a week.
What's that person doing for you? And where did you find them? And, what do they do now? Because I know your voice is authentic.
Yeah. Yep. So she started last fall, which was such a big gift to me and my time, right? The first thing I wanted to do was delegate out anything that was taking up the majority of my time. And for me, that was social media. So it took time, I would say between October and January, it took time for us to find my voice, right? And her writing my voice, like that just takes time when you hire a social media manager. I think sometimes there's expectations that this person's going to get it right away. And I feel like that's really unrealistic and really unfair to put on somebody. So it took her a few months to sort of figure out my voice, and how that looked realistically was she would schedule content and then I would go in and like heavily edit. So there'd be things or words, like here's an example early on. She said like sisters-in-law. And I was like, I would never say that.
Right.
I would never use that term. And so it's just small things like that you've kind of work through. I would say from like February on, it is now, I approve, 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of content in half an hour because it's just so easy now because she's really gotten used to my tone of voice and how I speak and, the way that I want to convey my message, which is not easy for a social media manager who's not used to the legal world either, right? Like that's a challenge too. So there were certain terms that it was like, we got to tweak that one a little bit. But it's been great. I mean, getting my time back to be able to work on the business and not in the business 24/7 has been the best gift I can have.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And I know you're doing a couple of different businesses, and I know that you, it looks like you have a position at a carrier as well.
I do.
So I think that that's awesome. You were able to niche all of that stuff out, and delegate it. It's not easy that she captured your voice. I think that Jules, who wears many hats in the marketing coordinator role, and we may be niching down on what her role is. She's one of the biggest things is she knows my voice. Right. So, for good or for bad. Right. So, so you gave me a shocking statistic at the beginning that only 27% of female partners, 27% of attorneys are female partners in law firms, right? Did I say that right? Female partners in law firms?
Yes.
Despite equal graduation rates, and 50% of women are leaving the profession due to barriers in business development.
Right.
Do me a favor, drill down on that, because it is shocking. And as an organization where my entire leadership team is all women, I've actually said on here multiple times, I think women have a tendency, and I'm going to generalize, so hopefully I don't get beat up for this by you two, but they're better at leadership.
Yeah.
Intrinsically, there's something about a lack of ego that I really value female leadership on a whole different level, different level than I ever, imagined. And so talk about those statistics and what that impact was for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's such a good topic. The thing I want to immediately point out is that the 27% number is majority white women. So even when we're talking about female partners, we're talking mostly about white women who have also majorly benefited from this system. And I don't want to take away from how hard people have worked and how much progress has been made, because it has not been easy and all of that has been fought for. But I do think it's important when we're having this conversation that we are pointing out that we have, I believe it's less than 5% persons of color. And that's a generalization, right? So I don't know the exact breakdown off the top of my head within that number, but it's less than 5% are persons of color who are in partnership. And that's abhorrent, and we've been graduating in equal numbers for for over 20 years. So that should easily be at 50% right now of females in, leadership, partnership, whatever that might look like in your organization within the law. And I think the other frustrating part that I hear often is we know what the problems are. It's not like we're on a fact-finding mission to figure out what the problems are, right? We know what a lot of the problems are. It's just a matter of what generation is going to be willing to actually fix it. And that's a complicated question. But it's worth examining, right? And so I think when we have these big disruptors, like COVID was a big disruptor, obviously, that forced change, right? I think AI is going to be another big disruptor that's going to force change. So all of that to say, when you have that, I guess it depends on how you look at it. That's a lot of women in partnership, but not nearly enough, right? Coming from the historical context and background that we're talking about. But when you have 50% of women citing barriers to business development as the reason that they're leaving, to me, this is a no-brainer to say, okay, well, let's train, and it gets tough because, it's not just women who need training on business development. Men are not getting it either. It just so happens that that's where my passion lies, right?
And what would you consider like some of the barriers in the business development space? Like when you guys talk about business development, what exactly are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. I would say plain and simple, the biggest barrier is that there are expectations to bring in business, right? To bring in your own clients, but there is no training and development on how to bring in that client. Right. So there's often the piece of advice that's given to a lot of attorneys that says, put your head down, do good work, and it's going to come. It's like, okay, well, I'm looking at who's in partnership and none of them reflect who I am or how I want to live my life. So it
Mhm.
didn't just come, right? Like it's hard to say that and then look at partnership. There's just that disconnect there, right? So you're telling people you need to bring in business, but you're never telling them how to bring in business. It's always the
Okay.
what, it's never the how. And so we need to really break down what it means to actually bring in business. And that goes to what you guys talk about all the time, which is marketing, sales, the really basic, even how to run your own business, right? You are an entrepreneur as an attorney, whether you want to be or not. Um, and so you have to have some of these business basics. And I think there's a lot of good intentions of people wanting to help, uh, but they just don't know how to explain to a fifth year associate, here's how I got my $1 million book of business. They don't know how to break it down. I think they have good intentions of wanting to help, but they just don't know how. So that's where I come in. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Mhm, mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah. Mhm. When I get hired by the law firms, it's open to men and women. For my personalized one-on-one coaching, I only take on women. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. I think it's what we've been talking about, right? We all enter practice, and I think it was just sort of this initial wake-up call of like, "Oh, I can't just be a good attorney." Like, that's what I was told. Yeah, I can't just be a good attorney. And I've always been very entrepreneurial, right? Like, I've always had something to prove to everybody. And so, and I love that part of myself. I love that entrepreneurial spirit that I have. And so I think when I learned about the whole book of business, model and going into partnership and all that sort of stuff, I was in my first year and it just lit me up. And so I said, oh, I can go do this. And so I had early success with it. But as I was, rising, quote unquote, you look to your left and you look to your right and you enter with all these smart, brilliant women and it slowly drops off, right? And you're like, what is going on? Right? And so you see all of these, again, barriers that we're talking about before with, childcare, lack of mentorship, um, anything around parental leave, I would say, onboarding, offboarding, um, any sort of, I think, understanding of DE&I training. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Of like why different people leave. And I had a lot of women come to me and were like, how are you doing this? How are you bringing in business? How did you get that client? And so I kind of realized that I was coaching in a way without getting paid for it. And right. Yeah. And so the light bulb kind of went on and I was like, I should be getting paid for my time. like, um, and so I think I had always had this sort of fire in me of, I want all of these women to succeed if that's how they define success, right? And if they leave, great, but I want them to leave with having all of the information. And by that, I mean showing them that it is completely capable. They are completely capable of building a book of business. And I think once they prove that to themselves and can show that to them, if they choose to leave after that, great. That's their choice, but I want them to leave with all the information. And so I knew long term being in this field, I couldn't solve sexism and I couldn't solve centuries of patriarchy, right? But I could put more money, autonomy, and control into the hands of women. And so this is my small way of controlling that and saying, how can I do this for other women? And so that's when I launched this, and it's been the coolest thing ever and has made me a much better attorney, by the way, which is also really fun.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so is it restricted to just attorneys, or can any female business owner bring you on as a coach or join your programs?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm asking for Jules.
I don't actively advertise to anybody but attorneys, but I do have clients that are not attorneys. So
Well, look,
paralegals and I've got business owners, and because they're attracted to my message, right? They're attracted to how I can help them. And my message also goes across industries. But I try to, right, I want to speak to a specific person. If that person in another industry is drawn to what I'm saying, then great, I can help them. But it's not something I actively market towards.
I'll tell you what, I think that the skills you're teaching, again, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, I could sell anything to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And I've always had that skill, and I didn't need to be trained. I was born doing this.
Yeah.
But I think that, I think of two of my biggest rainmakers in my office, and they're both paralegals.
Yeah.
Right. Like, they're just really great at generating business. And I'm often encouraging, hey, listen, you're doing a great job. And they do it, and it's benefiting them. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think that anybody who has entrepreneurial aspirations at the root level, you got to be able to sell. If you can't sell, you ain't going to open up your own business. You ain't going to have your own business, not for very long.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that.
Sorry. And I think you have a very unique approach to it, because I think as women, there's almost this natural instinct in us that selling feels unnatural, pushing things on, not necessarily pushing things on people, but just selling as an act can feel very unnatural to women. So I think that you market it extremely well to other women attorneys, because you're right, you can't just be a good attorney. You have to know how to bring in business and develop business and network and how to work around people in that way. So yeah, I definitely think it applies to not just attorneys, but every business owner or women in business out there. So definitely a very great message.
Well, here's what's interesting is, so I'm also in-house counsel, which was one of the best things I ever did for my clients, was becoming in-house counsel. Because I went from pursuing the client to being the client. And so I also host a mastermind. So I do masterminds for 6 months at a time. And I always bring in guest experts. So I bring in a sales expert, and I bring in an in-house attorney, and I bring in whatever that group needs. And one of the in-house attorneys that I usually bring in, something she always says to me and to the group, which is always this aha moment for them, is that women are often great at, again, I'm generalizing, but women are often great at building the relationship and really bad at making the ask. And so she talks about how she has all of these women building relationships with her, and she's dying for them to just make the ask, right? She's like, this isn't weird. It's not uncomfortable. This isn't a cold call. We know each other, and I'd be delighted to give you my business, but you have to ask me for it. Right. And so, and there's always this light bulb that goes on for them of like, oh yeah, I'm not making the ask because I'm afraid of what that's going to like mean for our relationship or how that's going to turn out. And so often, yeah, it's teaching attorneys a very simple 2 lines that they can say at the end of their time together to put in that person's brain. Oh, I'm going to give this person some trademark work next time I see them.
Wait a minute now. You're not going to not tell us those 2 lines, right? Like you can give anybody that's listening to this at least a little nugget.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very simple. I think anytime you're at the end of spending time with someone, you can easily say something along the lines of, hey, you know that I do IP work. I would love the opportunity to handle your trademarks if you would give me that chance to prove to you that I can do this really well. That's it. And then they say, oh, great. You know, I'd love to keep you in mind. We use so-and-so, but if that person gets conflicted out or if something comes up, I'd love to give you that opportunity. And I'll tell you, as in-house, you know, it's really important to be able to rely on multiple different firms and people for your work, right? So you don't want all of your work going to one firm.
Right.
So it's important to build those relationships. And I think there's a lot from what I hear from other in-house attorneys. There's a lot of firms who are very complacent in the work they're getting. And I think it'd be very easy for many attorneys to say those 2 lines and start getting work from an in-house attorney because they see how appreciative they are of getting that work.
Right. So I'll tell you that I think it's a really underrated skill. It's so simple, the ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ask. And that's one of the things I think is like an untapped superpower for female lawyers and entrepreneurs, which is you guys are way better at relationship building, communication. Like men are just not built the same way from a communication standpoint. You're better listeners. And, you know, again, that humility aspect where a lot of men probably should not talk as much as they do. And so the ability to build those relationships, if you could just fine tune it with that one component of the ask, that's super powerful, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think the ask is what I like, that's the part that I meant was like the uncomfortableness. Like that was definitely a great way to put it.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's amazing how few make the ask. It's shocking.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. We just build it up in our heads, you know, of like, oh, I'm going to come off as scummy or, you know, uncomfortable or icky or, you know, as if I'm only spending time with them to get X. And it's like, I mean, to agree, you are. So, you know, you can still have an authentic relationship and still spend time with someone that you enjoy and also understand that they're a client, you know, or a potential client. And everybody understands that. So yeah, we overthink it way too much.
And one of the benefits that you've talked about is money freedom and time freedom that comes with building a successful book of business. So talk about, you know, well, one, so somebody signs up for coaching and I know you're giving them homework and there's a framework involved. How long before you think somebody is uncomfortable with the ask, let's say a Juliet signs up with you, how long before Juliet could expect to start seeing that aha moment once you get into the framework that you deploy?
I would say the aha moment comes about halfway in. The first, and this is not everyone, but typically attorneys are really bad at understanding who their client even is, right? So they always come to me. This is my favorite question. I say, okay, well, what do you do? They say, oh, I'm a commercial litigator. I'm like, great. What does that mean? Right? What does commercial litigation mean? That means nothing to me as an attorney. Right? Most attorneys are like, I couldn't tell you what you do if you told me you do commercial litigation. And no outside person is going to be understand what commercial litigation is versus, you know, saying something along the lines of, oh, well, you know how most medium-sized businesses can't afford to hire a general counsel yet? Well, I help them as a fractional GC from everything from hiring to firing. boom, now I know much more about who you are and what you do. And so it's helping them switch to who do you want to be speaking to? Who do you actually want to be serving long term? Not just who this partner is telling you to serve, but like what actually lights you up? Who is someone that you could see yourself enjoying, actually wanting to call back, right? And so it's going to be really important to spend the time understanding that, spend the time understanding what are your values? Why are you doing this? Why is this important to you? Having those things align along with who your ideal client is. From there, once you sort of get back to the basics and build the foundation for them, then you can jump off of that foundation and say, okay, who's in your referral network? Let's start building that referral network. Or we got to talk about inbound and outbound marketing, because right now, all you're doing is inbound marketing. You're not doing any outbound marketing. So I think just introducing some of these like frameworks for them to put buckets of people in, and then to get it out of their heads and onto a piece of paper is incredibly powerful. And then the rest of that is accountability. Accountability can really be the most important piece of this, right? I mean,
It's the most important piece.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a story.
Yeah. So I employ, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to answer that question, but I employ, I think 4 sets of coaches for myself, right? Because one, as the head of a firm, and anybody that's listening to this, I would encourage, if you own a law firm, I see the craziest questions online. I'm sure you see them too. People are like, I want to start marketing. Where do I turn to? And then somebody will say, you need to hire an SEO company. I'm like, stop. Join a mastermind. Get yourself a coach. Don't just listen, I'm speaking from experience. I've thrown millions of dollars against the wall in the last 30 years to see what sticks. And I already knew marketing and rainmaking, right? They didn't have coaches like you or my current existing executive level coaches. So yeah, accountability is why I deploy coaches for myself. But I find it interesting that I kind of want to dig down on with you, because a lot of these lawyers you might be coaching work at firms, right?
Yep.
Do you find that a barrier is that a lot of the people that might call you, a lot of leads that might call you, are unwilling to invest in themselves? Does that make sense? Or you need me to clarify that?
Absolutely. That makes sense. Yes, is the answer. I think there's a lot of people who expect the law firms to teach them. And then I get a call a year later. So in that point, it's like, okay, I'll see you in a year when you call me and figure this out. And again, I don't want to knock against the firms, because I want to hold them accountable, but it's unrealistic to ask partners to be great managers, great rainmakers, great lawyers, great business owners, and to train and develop their associates. That is insanely unrealistic. So I think when firms and business owners or law firm owners can get out of that and say, I need to start outsourcing this, that's when the magic can happen, right? And so 70% of my clients are the firms are paying me to train their associates. The other piece of that is associates that are paying out of pocket. And even when they're paying out of pocket, I am helping them put a plan together to say, look, you need to go show them that you paid for 6 months at this amount. Will you pay for the next 6 months? Like, to show them that you're taking it seriously, or if that's a concern. So even the clients that are paying me directly, I am a huge advocate for them that they present to their firms that they should be paying for it, because they should. And it's also, I don't know if you struggle with this, but I struggle almost calling myself a coach. That's like the closest term I can put to it. But mine is really a training program, right? Like, there's coaching involved. It's not like I just give them curriculum and call them a day. But so there's coaching involved in it, but it really is a training program to help them get to this sustainable level where they have the tools to go out and get clients. Then it's just a matter of accountability, right?
Right. I do think, though, I don't want to move off that one topic, because it's been a kind of a question always. I invest significantly in my team.
Yeah.
Jules will tell you, right? She just came back from 2 marketing association things. She's coming to another one with me, Pilma, coming up in May. When I tried at one point to put together a marketing program for associates with my current coach, I'm a big believer, though, that people should be 50% paying themselves, because there's got to be buy-in. I have said I'll pick up 50% for the entire class, not a small investment, but you guys got to pick up the other 50%. And at the time, everybody dropped out one month after the other. And I'm like, listen, it's $100 on your side. It's 100. It's thousands on mine. I don't think that people, and I don't want to generalize, because I know I'm the old guy in the room, right? But I don't think that people realize spending $1,200 to learn how to market for a full year of coaching.
Yep.
Your first personal injury case that comes in, you should be making 10 to 100 times that from an ROI standpoint. So people are willing to spend $8 on a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but not willing to invest in themselves. And that's where I kind of have always drawn the line, for better or for worse, because like you said, and I can't appreciate you enough, or anybody that's listening to this, your statement of the expectation on partners in a firm needs to be realistic. You know, like I often say to Jules, you want to be an expert, you want to be my marketing director, no problem. I will sign you up for classes, pay for all of it. You got to do the work.
Absolutely.
You got to put the time in and do the work.
Yeah. And there is such a disservice that lawyers get when they enter this profession, right? I mean, law school does not teach us anything.
Right. Nothing you need to survive.
Right. You're making a 6-figure investment, multiple 6 figures often, for 3 years for this education. And you're not willing to make a 4-figure or a 5-figure investment on like long-term career. And I think that's the switch is, again, attorneys are sitting there thinking, this firm's going to take care of me. They're going to teach me. They're going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's unrealistic on both sides, right? And so it's not this huge knock against the firms. I think it's just unrealistic. And the mindset and the mentality of coaching, masterminds, all of that is so new to the legal world, I would say. So I'll tell you, when I am working with firms, I do not call it a mastermind, because 90% of the time they don't get it. So I use training and development programs that they can also, I'm not a tax attorney. This is not tax advice. But you can write off on training and development, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think we just do a huge disservice to attorneys to not set them up to think, I have to take control and ownership over my career. I can't rely on X partner to take me under their wing and teach me everything and do everything. I have to be paying and investing in my own future and my own career to make this what I want it to be. And this old model of, okay, I go to law school, I do OCI, I get the summer associate position, which by the way is only 10% of attorneys. And then I, go into the firm, I make partner, and then I work there till I die. That's not the model anymore.
No.
So we have to, even that, we've got to figure that out. And I think the best way to do that is by investing in yourself.
Yeah.
To be competitive and to lateral well. And I'm with you.
Look,
this is like a high horse for me. I am with you.
Yeah. Look, I mean, listen, you got to keep beating that drum, right? Because so as somebody who's actively in the middle of succession planning, I'm a business owner. I'm building to sell. There is you've worked here 10 years. Let me give you some equity in an 8-figure firm. That is not realistic, right? So what you're doing by, your mission to create rainmakers in the niche that you're in is fantastic. Because then you don't have to start your own law firm. You can afford to buy in. Right? You can afford, because partners, the concept of partnership, we need to dispel the myth of you work there for 10 years, 20 years, and then you get equity. That's not like you own a coaching business, right?
Yeah.
If Juliet goes and becomes a coach under you, you build it up to 8 figures. You're going to just give it to her because you like her, or you're going to monetize everything you build.
Hopefully. No, I'm kidding.
Right?
I'm just joking. Yeah.
But I think that the law is the one field where young associates coming out of law school need to be disabused about what equity looks like. You want equity in a real business, you better get your checkbook out. You better be able to afford a significant buy-in, because there are firms that are built like machines now, right? Marketing machine, HR machine, all these different facets. You think I got that for free? Nobody handed me that, right? I started with one laptop, no paralegals, right? So what you're offering is a road not only to money freedom, but time freedom, right? But they got to be willing to invest in themselves. I'm not a huge fan where it's 100% investment, because then I've had people that just weren't invested. They weren't bought in. They were just taking it, so that's why I've always tried to deploy that 50% model. Right.
You're like speaking Tom's language right now.
Yeah,
he says this all the time. Like, you have to invest in yourself. He always says like, you gotta generate businesses, lawyers, everything like that. So you're literally, you guys are like sharing your brain right now. And I think it's like a common misconception again among lawyers, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, because I'm not a lawyer, but I think like, the mindset is you go to law school, you work at a firm, and like you're fine, like because you're there and like that's the business. But like you mentioned earlier, as a lawyer, you're an entrepreneur whether you like it or not. And I think a lot of people who go into law school do not realize that part of it.
No, not at all. I didn't.
Listen, but I think you are spitting a lot of wisdom in this podcast. Like, not only are you an entrepreneur, a lot of associates I've seen come in the door have a mindset of, I got my degree, I got my license, I'm done. And it's like, no. You're just starting out, my friend. You need to learn how to try cases and bring in business. I make it look easy. You make it look easy doing the marketing, right? But you're putting in the work. You didn't just start out an expert.
Yeah. I was on a podcast last week and they were talking to me about personal branding. And she goes, it just seems so like natural and easy for you. And I was like, let's not put this BS out there.
Yeah.
Anybody who says that is lying to you. I said, it is much more natural to me now, but it still takes an immense amount of intentional effort. And same thing, I'm investing in my own coaching, that I'm writing checks that make me like,
I know.
I'm writing them, or I shouldn't say writing checks. Right. That's such
just a monthly payment.
Like sending a Zelle or something.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. I'm doing all of that. And I think that's a large part for my clients too, to say, look, I'm not just saying this to you. I am actively doing this. I'm not just telling you to spend money. I'm spending money so that I can continue to provide you with the best service possible. Right. And it's changed my life dramatically.
100%.
But it takes a ton of discipline and a ton of intention. But I also know that doing this personal branding as an attorney and creating this business while also full-time practicing has built such a beautiful life for myself, because people ask me all the time, they're like, are you going to quit your job? When are you going to quit your job? And I tell them all the time, and this is very true, I have no intention of quitting because I love my job. I love being an attorney. I worked really hard to become an attorney, and then I worked really hard to become a good attorney, and I really enjoy that. But I also have this huge passion for what I'm doing. And I know that my career as a lawyer would suffer if I didn't build this business. And so it helps to fill this passion of mine. And it also takes the pressure off of my job to fulfill that for me, which has made it so much more enjoyable for me. And now I love talking to lawyers and law firm owners about personal branding, because I'm like, you should not be afraid of this. You should not be afraid of your attorneys having a personal brand. What does it look like for you to encourage your attorneys to do personal branding?
Well, I'll give you, for instance, like, so one, I think everybody needs to work on personal brand, right? Like no one wants to interact with a business. We put stuff up on our business pages and the interactions are like nominal compared to my personal branding stuff. I mean, on LinkedIn, last year, I got 1 million impressions, right? And which is not a ton, but it's getting there.
No, it's a lot.
So I had that conversation with Juliet. Juliet's like, how old are you, Jules?
24.
24. She'll be 25 in less than a month. But Jules is really a skilled, talented, hardworking business person, right?
Yeah.
So I sat down with her maybe 2 months ago. I said, if you want to add value for yourself, start developing a personal brand around what you love. She was like very self-conscious about putting herself out, all that stuff you talked about, like just not feeling that comfort level. I mean, listen, who wants to look at my face or hear my voice on a repeat? But I do it to put out value in things I'm passionate about, right? So hopefully I find my tribe. She started doing it. She's passed 100,000 impressions on Instagram on one post.
Amazing.
She hasn't even said one thing yet about how she wants to go, what direction she wants to go in or anything else, but she found a niche for herself, right?
Yep.
So what it looks like is, for me, I'm the kind of person, I'm not a big believer that I'm going to make somebody anything. They got to want it, right? I talk about it all the time. I talk about financial freedom. I talk about time freedom. I talk about marketing and business generation. If people ask me further, I offer that advice. I put out content all the time. Like you would think, if you worked in my law firm, you'd be listening to my podcast and reading my LinkedIn, just kind of see where my mindset's at, right? So I encourage it. And I'm not sure where it lands, quite honestly. Some people are doing it. I think more people are now in the consumption phase of social media without realizing that if you're a creator and you have an audience, you have monetizable power, right? I said to Jules,
attention is power.
Attention is power. You're day trading attention, as Gary Vee says, right? So, I said to Jules, you get 100,000 followers. Don't you think you're more valuable to me? You think you're more valuable to anybody?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think as attorneys, well, a few things. The first thing is, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Right.
And that should be freeing.
Yes.
But
Extremely.
it's easy to say that. It's not easy to live that out, right? It's like telling you to like not be anxious, right? Not helpful advice.
Right.
But I think truly the best way, and I say this to my clients all the time, do you remember my first post on LinkedIn? Do you remember what I posted last week? And the answer is always no.
Right.
And that should be freeing, because no one is thinking about you, really. No one is sitting around talking about you. And the people who might at the beginning, right? Because the trend is always like, oh my gosh, who does this person think they are? What are they doing? To then, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Can you teach me? And so if you can get through that first phase and recognizing that those are not your people, and you will quickly find your people, you're going to be set. And I always use this tagline of, I met more people in the first 6 months of posting on LinkedIn than I did in the first 6 years of practicing law. And I was an active go-getter, right? But LinkedIn is just so powerful. Social media is powerful. Personal branding is powerful.
It's very powerful.
If you can get over that initial, like, oh my gosh, what is everybody going to think? You will quickly get from who does she think she is to, oh my gosh, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And once you get to the, oh my gosh, how did you do that phase, you're set. And it is short-term pain for some long-term gain.
Right. And I'll tell you that the funny part of it is too, if it helps anybody get online, and Jules, this might be something good for you as far as LinkedIn, right? It's when they're like at the stage of who the hell does that person think they ought to be giving any kind of advice, right? Like Molly's clearly very much younger than me, right?
Yeah.
those are not your people, right?
No.
What ends up happening is if you love marketing, Jules, for a second, or take Molly for a second, why did I follow Molly? I loved what she was putting out. It's related to what I'm passionate about, which is marketing. And I connected with Molly, right? Because I believe her mission, her vision for what she wants to accomplish in the coaching. So like, you put out what resonates with you. And one, like Molly said, it's like a 3-second attention span. People forgot about you before they even scrolled past your post, but also they remember you when they need to, right? But also, so what if they're like, who the hell is Jules at 24? And that's not your people. You mentioned that developing a personal brand is about intention, discipline, passion. I would add one more thing for my young 25-year-old people, Jules, patience.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I don't know. How old are you, Molly? You mind me asking you? I know
No,
you're not supposed
at
to ask.
all. So I'm 33.
How old are you? Okay. So Jules is 24. And one of the biggest things I see is people with tremendous potential not having the patience to just give it a year, give it some time to take hold, right? You don't go from working as an associate to complete time and money freedom in 12 months, but you might in two years, right? You can develop, like in 1 year, I built up to 10,000 followers, 1 year.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, is this powerful?
Yeah.
Right. But I also I'm not in a rush. I'm 55 years old. I'm like, I know better than to be like, oh, it didn't work after, 2 months and I feel awkward and all of that stuff.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, I think that intention is huge. Too many people that will be listening to this or reading our stuff on LinkedIn lack intention. They don't sit down and plan their days. They kind of show up in a hustle frenzy at work at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And you got to have intention. Where are you spending your time? Where are you spending your money? Don't say, oh, let me throw $10,000 a month at SEO. Hire somebody who first teaches you the different stuff that's lower cost marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I love talking about patience because I'm a very impatient person, right? And I'm sure you might be too, which is what makes us, I think, really good entrepreneurs because we're quick decision makers.
Yes.
But I tell people a lot that it's important to be impatient with your actions and patient with your results. So I tell them impatience is actually a great thing. This can be a great quality because it allows you to be impatient with your actions. So make the decision in 15 minutes. If you've been stewing on something for quite some time and you are like dragging your feet on it, set a timer, put 15 minutes together and make a decision. And then be patient with the results. But when you're impatient with those actions, it sort of quenches that thirst that you have. And there's this great Seth Rogen podcast, or it's not Seth Rogen's podcast, but there's this clip of Seth Rogen. And the question was, what is the difference between the people in Hollywood that you've seen are successful versus not successful? And his answer was simple and beautiful, which was, the people I've seen who are the most successful are the people who simply didn't quit. And he goes, and the people who aren't are the people who quit. And he goes, so that's really the best advice I can give is like, just don't stop. And when I think about, I'm 33, I think about this all the time. I mean, I have the long-term goal in mind, right? So I'm like, if this happened in a year and I'm on year 2 of my business, what's going to happen in 10 years, right? And I'm already making money. I'm already making a difference. That to me is what's motivating. Like, this is not some short-term thing I'm doing. I mean, I can't wait for 10 years from now to say, look at what we've built, look at what has occurred. And that excites me. I mean, so that 10-year thing, I think people are like, who has a 10-year vision? Yada, yada. It's like, well, I don't have a clear 10-year vision, but I know where I'm headed. The other thing that I'd love to talk about is, I've made money with very few followers, I would say. And I think there's a lot of people that grow really quickly that aren't making money.
Right.
And there's this other creator that I interact with a lot that we talk about that quite a bit. Is I'm like, I am not interested in growing super fast with the wrong people. I'm interested in growing with the people who want to pay me money.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's different.
I knew I
It's
liked you
different.
for a reason. I knew I liked you for a reason.
But it is really interesting. And I think on LinkedIn in particular, we're all having this conversation about how to make money on LinkedIn, right? Like, I think there's a lot of creators and a lot of lawyers in the background that are having these conversations. And yeah, you've got to be smart and strategic about it. I think you can't just throw up a bunch of cringe content or like a bunch of just inspirational content that gets you followers.
No, listen, and if you're not authentic in your voice, one of the things, like, I still do all my own LinkedIn posts, right? And one of the things I think is you better be authentic, and you can't be selling, right? Like, I've monetized LinkedIn. I get coaching clients off of there. I've gotten B2C clients off of there. I've gotten B2B clients off of there.
Yep.
I'm not selling anything. I'm just, I'm going on talking about what I know, providing value. And I think that, yeah, I'm not interested in a popularity contest. I have enough friends. I'm not really looking to just not do it for business purposes, right? So talk about the direction. Your coaching company is Juris Consult?
It is. Yeah, which, by the way, I hate that name.
I thought it was like a jury selection consultant type of thing.
Oh my gosh. No, it's a name that I like. I was stuck in picking a name. And so I just had to move forward. And so I really go, like, it's really my personal branding that people know me by, which is Molly Hough Esquire.
Right.
And that's my website and everything. But I operate under Juris Consult. So if you know of a good name, if you could let me know, that'd be great. Because I gotta think of a name, and I cannot. It has not come to me yet.
You know what? It's a common thing. I'm looking at certain branding opportunities with my fractional CMO with Jules right now, because now they allow brand names in New York for law firms. And I'm like, I want to take my name out of it. This is not a vanity exercise. So we're looking at, like, what's the rebrand going to look like? And we have to phase one in, phase one out. It's common. It's
you should just ask your LinkedIn or Instagram followers for suggestions. Like, literally put like a poll and be like, anybody have a good idea? And then, it'll get your engagement.
I mean, the only thing that I would ever say, because this is the interesting part. How do you transition personal brand into something that becomes sellable, which is not reliant on the person, right? Like, I don't know how you answer that question.
You're living in my brain right now. This is what I think about on a daily basis, because I don't want to just be a coaching business, right? I have plans that are much bigger than that. And I have to have a company, right? And so it's got to be more than a personal brand. And I got time. I'm not super.
No, man, you're 33 years old. Of course you got time. You got nothing but time.
She's got her whole life ahead of her.
But if anybody thinks of a brilliant name, please send it my way.
Absolutely.
I will gladly accept any addition. So
that's awesome, though. Look, I think but that's the nature of the business entrepreneurial mind, is you're constantly thinking, what are the next evolutions? Right. So I did want to ask another question, because you talk about female attorneys losing control of their lives or letting excuses interfere with their lives. So what are the common excuses or barriers that you've experienced in your position, and how have you helped your coaching clients overcome them?
I would say the biggest for the clients that I have has been, number one, confidence. They don't feel like they can take up the space to be an expert in their field. So oftentimes, they could be practicing for 8-10 years and they're like, I still just don't feel like I feel like I just started practicing law, which is a common experience, right? Like I experienced a lot of that too. But you still deserve to take up space, and it's a matter of how you're taking that space up. So that's a big barrier. The other big barrier or, excuse that I hear is the time and the money, right? Which is what we all hear. The money piece of it is, I just don't know if I can swing this right now. I don't know if this is, for me, yada, yada. And then for me, it's a sales call, right? It's getting them to focus on the problem, to really understand that this is a bargain for the problem that I'm solving for them. The time piece is very real, right? The time piece is real. I'm working with women who are moms, who, are taking on the majority of unpaid work, in addition to their very high billable jobs, in addition to firms asking them to do all sorts of non-billable work. So all of those time pressures are very real. But all of that just has to say, okay, well, something has to move. A priority has to move. Like, that's just the reality. So are you in a space? Is this a problem enough for you to make something like a backseat for a little bit? Or like, can you do less billables this year to like focus on, doing more marketing? So you've got to just make it a priority. I mean, that is the short of it, right? Now there's tools and things that I can help my clients with to get to that point. Yeah, confidence, money, time. No, I'd say those are the biggest ones.
I will tell you, man, you are so insightful with these answers that, so on the issue of time, Jules, what do I say every time we talk about this? Like, people don't have time, they make time, right?
Yep.
And listen, I know I have a lot of working moms in my office. I get it. I know how challenging it is. I see it. I go, I don't know how any of you are able to juggle all of this stuff. But like, I'll use my legal administrator as an example. She runs my entire operation. She is brilliant. She invests nights, weekends, hours and hours and hours on self-training outside of work, right? Like,
wow.
So yeah, if you want to get to the end goal, you got to carve out that time. It is a challenge, and nobody's saying it's easy, but man, what's on the other side of that is exactly what you're offering, which is time freedom and money freedom and just freedom in general, right?
Right. And if you don't have time now, you're definitely not going to have time later.
Yeah, you got to make the time. You really do. And what's puzzling for me in that confidence piece, I have observed that, right? And one of the things I was alluding to is that I think that's what I really value about female leadership in my firm. Too often I see men that are confident that shouldn't be. It is maddening to me when I see a man in a conversation not only ignore the women at the table, shut them down. And I'm like, hey, first of all, I'm paying multiple six figures in salaries to have this conversation. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm asking them for a reason. Like, I have literally had to shut that down on more than one occasion in my career, where it's kind of shocking to me. Right. Like, but it's the humility. And there was some weird statistic that Jules and I came across where men will overestimate their capabilities by like 50 to 75%. And then there will be women who won't apply for the same job that they're overqualified for in the same reverse ratios. So it's just something that I think organizations and people like you keep putting out that stuff and believing, women having the confidence to be the voice at the table, right? Yeah. Too often they do know better and they're silenced by egos at the table that probably shouldn't even be at the table. And I've actually in the past asked them to leave the table so that the people could talk that need to talk, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, have you ever heard of the blabber effect?
No.
But
you're going to tell us.
So it's the phenomenon that whoever speaks most in the meeting is the most likely to get promoted to leadership, and the people who are speaking most in meetings is men. And it's this like direct correlation to the people who are speaking the most in meetings are seen as the most competent, or have more leadership capabilities, when in fact they don't, right? But they're still getting promoted the most. And so it's called the blabber effect.
So one of the things I'm learning, now I'm 55. I've learned a lot over my 30 years in business. And one of the things I'm realizing is the value of silence. And I'm staying quiet a lot more because I have nothing to prove. And I think for men, I could speak for men personally, that a lot of it's insecurity when they're younger. They feel like they have to impress everybody at the table. They gotta talk the most. And now I'm realizing the power in silence and listening. And if I notice that there are people sitting around my conference room table who are listening, but they're not speaking, those are the ones I'm often waiting to get the opinion from. And I'll ask them, hey, I heard what, this person said. What are your thoughts? I want to, if you're at the table in my office, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what you have to say. So that blabber effect is a funny way of saying it, but I've observed it. So I know it's real. I've observed it. Listen, Molly, I want to be respectful of your time. Jules, did you have any more questions for Molly before we wrap it up?
No, I think we covered everything.
Yeah, listen, this podcast was awesome. You delivered, right? Like you delivered some real wisdom, and I love it. We'll put in any of the links to your profiles and your business. I do want to talk about a couple of the things that you offer. You offer Coaching Kitchen. If you want to just give us a quick 30 seconds on what is the Coaching Kitchen?
Yes, the Coaching Kitchen is an intimate dinner party for female attorneys to come together and connect. So it's meant to move outside of gray conference walls and move into more of an authentic way to interact with each other. And I think more of the way that women connect with each other anyways. So I have some rules for it. So you can't talk about work for the first 30 minutes. So you've got to connect with people as people and not connect value to the work that they do. The second thing is that you can't show up as your best self. So you're not there to present your best self or to one up everybody or to, be the best in the room. And the third thing is that you have to shut up and listen. And so the idea that you're there to learn more about who's in front of you than speaking. So it is one of my favorite things I get to do. It is the coolest way to connect, and women are starting to form law firms from these Coaching Kitchen events.
That's awesome.
Oh, I love that. They actually sound so fun.
I love that. So, and Molly, when we get off of this, I got to connect you with a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine that run masterminds that, man, I'd love to connect and get you as a facilitator at one or two of those things where it's the same type of thing. The rules are no bullshit. This is not about ego. And people will, and it's brutal. If people start going down that road of, I make so much money, everybody's like, cut the shit or leave the room. Right. So, but what's awesome about that is then you get to everybody suffering with something in that room and you're in the hot seat for a half an hour talking about it. Right. So I love that concept. And I love that you're doing it in a way that works with your passions, right? Like you get people together for an intimate dinner party. I love that you have those rules. And people can just apply for that, right? They can just fill out an application and apply for that on your website.
Yeah. So it's not an application. There's 8 to 10 spots each time. They usually fill up pretty quick. So it's just a matter of watching for when it opens up and snagging a spot.
Nice. I like it. You also have an ebook on your website. What's that ebook called?
Yeah, I do. So I have a LinkedIn guide. So it's 90 days to becoming an expert on LinkedIn. So if you're someone that has been posting a little bit or you haven't started posting at all, this is going to get you up and running in 90 days to start being seen as an expert on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So you also offer one-on-one coaching, right? Which we talked about earlier. And you have the Associate Accelerated Program, which I guess is group coaching at law firms. Yes?
It is. Yep. So I run my own masterminds and then law firms can hire me to put together a mastermind for their associates as well.
How long does the average mastermind last? 6 months, 12 months? How long does that usually last?
Yep. The masterminds are 6 months. Often they choose to stay on for another 6 months, but we start with 6.
Awesome. And obviously you're seeing results, so they wouldn't be keeping you on for another 6 months. So I think that's awesome. Molly, thank you so much for coming on. I knew I've been waiting for a while to get you on the show, so I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll put, your LinkedIn, your Instagram and your website up on the show notes. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on.